Buck Rogers is a character that is introduced. This is a character, an original science fiction story, which is interesting because it has a lot of the tropes that you might associate with a number of science fiction stories. A fighter pilot sort of falls asleep, reawakens in a sort of transformed future, and involved in a future war. That future war story is actually pretty common in the early sort of science fiction, and Buck Rogers is a kind of prototype, almost for a kind of jetpack, ray gun kind of hero. It is a character that has certain racial connotations. The original story, it's not necessarily aliens that he's fighting, I would argue.
Can you tell me a bit more about the kind of racial element there?
I think one of the things that happens with these adventure stories is that you have a white hero, male hero, often pitted against an other. And that other can be read various ways. As we get sort of further developed in the science fiction story, I would argue the aliens take on whatever kind of negative characteristics you might associate with lots of different racialized others. But in a lot of the early stories, you're othering sort of foreign people, like the Asian and so on and so forth. There's a pattern of both, white people sort of mastering the knowledge and practices of quote unquote lesser people or people of color, as Jess alluded to, going to Tibet and learning how to meditate, and that gives you powers, or going to Africa and living in the jungle and matching yourself against nature, and that makes you physically strong and heightens your senses, and that gives you power. And there's a way where the kind of prototype of the kind of white hero who has skills and ability that exceed those of his sort of other opponent really is a kind of recurring theme in the pulps. And with the cowboy, the other is the Native American, and his skills are really the skills associated with conquering and maintaining and creating the frontier. In the science fiction stories, there's a way where the physical and a kind of almost innate intelligence allows for that hero to overcome what might be a quote unquote technologically superior war machine, but he has the ability to sort of overcome. So I always think about this as a way for anxieties associated with this period, which is, we should always, I like to point out, a period of like rapid transformations, not just simply in terms of like the way people live and population, but also in terms of technology, right? If you think about what happens between, say, 1900 and 1930, there's tremendous transformation in terms of the technical landscape that people have to navigate, right? In some ways, you go from things that you can look at and understand how they work to things that are invisible, like X-rays and electronics and all these things. Flight happens, and so a lot of these heroes, they may not be scientists at all, right? But they are physically adept, and they are morally sure, and with that combination, they are able to succeed, right? And that's one of the things that's really reassuring, I would argue, to the reader.